I'm Dave Roper. Tonight you will see something otherworldly. You will see something that people often believe and fall into religious fanatic cults, and then they go into these weird fucking sex rings and shit. I'm telling you that this shit is not something you want children to be around for, okay? Do you understand? Because if I catch any of your children watching this, you will be sentenced to hell. And now, I just want to make it clear that if you don't fucking get your kids out of this fucking room right now, especially in this film production as it plays in your living room, you're gonna go straight to the bottom pits of hell. You understand? Okay, now, I tell you, this movie is gonna rock your socks off.
Can I ask a serious question? Like a very serious, like no bullshit? I think it's a very genuine question and it's not often asked enough. Why are there so many anti-transgender bills using the defense of trying to prevent child but then there are no efforts whatsoever on a legal or legislative basis to prosecute people like Matt Gaetz, who has a child trafficking ring?
But what if I told you that
there was another predator?
For fuck's sake, I mean, do I need to mention the Catholic Church for the millionth time in a row? Since, like, the 1940s, as far as we're cognizant of, I'm a victim of that as well. I was when I was a child. When I was a child, by the Catholic Church, no less, in Sunday school. My never got the prosecution as she deserved. She died without punishment. You might say, oh, God will do that or whatever, but I don't give a fuck about what God thinks. If God thinks what happened to me was justified or not.
What's that?
I'm sorry.
These are my panties. What are you doing?
I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. I have this boner and it won't go away and I don't know what to do.
I just happened to be walking past your working place. You weren't there, so I thought I'd come over here.
Snuffkin, did you see you-know-what?
Of course I didn't. I closed my eyes like I said.
Of course you did.
I kind of very randomly ran into that one. Like, I'm not here to kink shame. Of course, we all have our kinks, and we're all into different things that, so to speak, get our rocks off, of course. And if, mommy doll gets you off, then okay. Of course, the genre is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about very specifically the fact that this plot is around gender dysphoria. Something that I don't think that the producers of this film are aware of what that even means. Because of course, according to this plot, which of course we're not supposed to take seriously, the proposed solution to gender dysphoria is not transforming healthcare, it's mommy needs to you.
See, that's your problem. You simply can't appreciate good comedy. You're one of the many triggered SJWs who simply can't take a joke. See, the punchline to that video was...
You're not even
funny. This one in particular is on par with like Border Patrol porn. It's like fetishizing the marginalization of adolescent children. Like, it's already kind of really fucking weird that the industry of porn regularly pushes that envelope like ever so closer to pedophilia these days. It's even more troubling that when there are laws being targeted towards transgender children on the claim that transgender healthcare is child, and yet this is the very same culture, that kind of fucking hateful ass rhetoric that is being passed on legislation creates the culture that in and is socially acceptable where being transgender and LGBT is not. I don't think it's justified to prosecute parents of transgender children, especially when those parents, which are rare by the way, are supportive of their transgender children. It's rare to see parents that are actually willing to do the education, do the research, try to understand what it means to be transgender and how it applies to their kids. It's very rare to see that.
My name is Brandon Bolware. I'm a lifelong Missourian. I'm a business lawyer. I'm a Christian. I'm the son of a Methodist minister. I'm a husband. I'm the father of 4 kids. 2 boys, 2 girls, including a wonderful and beautiful transgender daughter, who today happens to be her birthday. And I chose to be here. She doesn't know that. One thing I often hear when transgender issues are discussed is, I don't get it. I don't understand. And I would expect some of you to have said that and feel the same way. I didn't get it either. For years, I didn't get it. Forced my daughter to wear boy clothes and get short haircuts, play on boys' sports teams. Why did I do this? To protect my child. And truth be told, I did it to protect myself as well. I wanted to avoid those inevitable questions as to why my child did not look and act like a boy. My child was miserable. I cannot overstate that. She was absolutely miserable, especially at school. No confidence, no friends, no laughter. I honestly say this, I had a child who did not smile. Did that against the advice of teachers, therapists, and other experts. I remember the day everything changed for me. I'd gotten home from work and my daughter and her brother were in the front lawn. And my daughter had sneaked on one of her older sister's play dresses. And they wanted to go across the street and play with the neighbor's kids. It was time for dinner. I said, come in. She asked, can she go across the street? I said, no. She asked me if she went inside and put on boy clothes, could she then go across the street and play? And it's then that it hit me that my daughter was equating being good with being someone else. I was teaching her to deny who she is. As a parent, the one thing we cannot do, the one thing, is silence our child's spirit. My wife and I stopped silencing our child's spirit. The moment we allowed my daughter to be who she is, to grow her hair, to wear the clothes she wanted to wear, it was a different child. And I mean, it was immediate. It was a total transformation. I now have a confident, a smiling, a happy daughter. She plays on a girls' volleyball team. She has friendships. She's a kid.
And yet, for strange, unexplained reason, they're the ones being persecuted, and their children. But the Catholic Church, Matt Gaetz, Donald Trump, without punishment. Do I gotta say that word? It's like literally saying Hitler now. It's like Godwin's law. Say, if you talk about anything political, Donald Trump or Adolf Hitler will be brought up. Also, just random fact, there's also the book burnings that took place in Nazi Germany. The Institute of Sexology was burned after there was a huge fucking wave of anti-transgender propaganda and anti-LGBT propaganda being put into place with pink triangles and shit during the Weimar Republic. Are we better than the Nazis? Is the USA better than the Nazis? I don't think so.
Here in the East, a similar process will repeat itself for the second time, as in the conquest of America.
Can we address the elephant in the room?
On the 7th of October, 1941, a camp was established in Auschwitz for Soviet prisoner of war. About 10,000 men were registered as prisoners and held in a special fenced-off compound comprising of blocks 1 to 3, 12 to 14, 22 to 24. Most of them died of hunger, hard work and SS brutality. Many others were gassed, shot or ordered of a special Gestapo commission. This is where the camp Gestapo was located. Prisoners suspected of involvement in the camp's underground resistance movement or of preparing to escape were interrogated here. Many prisoners died.
Recently, there's been a lot of claim, especially in the U.S. as well as the United Kingdom, that transgender people are new, that our understanding of transgender people is new. Well, then I've got some news for you, because what happened at the Institute of Sexology, that's why you think that, because there is little to no available information about transgender people. So people who are saying this claim that transgender people are new or something, they're speaking very dishonestly. And they're speaking in generalizations. Even Stonewall was like in the 1960s when that happened. And it was started by a black trans woman, no less. Queer history is regularly censored or erased entirely. You are not taught this in school. All straight people do in our society is shove heteronormativity down children's throats non-consensually. This is what pride is about! Pride is about resistance, autonomy, unashamed, unapologetic, and free. Because gay bars were very hard to maintain and sustain because police were regularly raiding them. It wasn't uncommon in the United States where LGBT people were just like stopped by the police just because they looked a certain way. And with this new wave of anti-LGBT and specifically anti-transgender bills, being that they're trying to prevent children from being exposed to child abuse, it's a very fallacious claim. A very dishonest and disingenuous claim about what the motives are. This is a bold claim again being made not just in the US but also the UK, as those are colonized fucking countries. As the United Kingdom has colonized nearly most of the world and the US is not too far behind. And of course, the United Kingdom has done its own fair share of indigenous genocide in places like India. This is what the Gandhi shit was about, by the way. A small part of it. But when it comes to resources about transgender people and transgender history, it predates colonialism, and that's kind of the point, right? Because Adolf Hitler was a settler colonist.
America has gunned down the millions of Indians to a few 100,000, and now keep the modest remnant under observation in a cage.
He very much took an interest in settler colonialism. A settler is a person who moves with a group to live somewhere else, such as a new country or new land. This has often been confused with the concept of a refugee. Refugees are not settlers. A refugee is someone who moves to another area but is displaced from the previous area. Refugees are not moving to another place because they choose to. They are doing so because they have to. Colonialism, on the other hand, is taking control of a land, whether through legislation or by coercion. You know, typically to bring settlers in for exploitation. Settler colonialism is a type of colonialism where indigenous peoples from an area are displaced by settlers. You can also say that indigenous peoples are refugees in this case, since they are displaced and forced to move. And settler colonialism is a structure that literally marginalizes people into a binary. In the example of white supremacy, black or white. In the example of patriarchy, man or woman. So homophobia and transphobia are just extensions of patriarchy and white supremacy.
Black men's masculinity is always taken from them, and we do not have to be toxic about it. If the men here, especially the black men here, if you think liberation looks like you having the rights of white men, I have another thing coming for you. The patriarchy is running amok. We have people speaking in this crowd about genitalia. No one has mentioned Tony, a black man who has also been killed, but since he is trans, it seems like no one can speak up for him. We cannot be about white supremacy. Being about our genitalia, being about the gender binary is about white supremacy. You have to understand, on Turtle Island, my people are Blackfoot. We had 8 different genders. We didn't give a fuck about what was between your legs. That's not where your power comes from. I'm tired of our black community being divided. I'm tired of my black people saying that me expressing my gender and my sexuality is in line with white supremacy. We can't let white people have nothing. They come from us. Africa is the beginning. There's a lot of black women that die by police officers as well.
Which is why I mentioned the Institute of Sexology. That actually not only just did research on transgender people, but it did a lot of innovation for endocrinology. As the Weimar Republic was forming into fruition, the Institute of Sexology did a lot of community organizing. There were people who were advocates doing extensive amount of mutual aid to grant protections to LGBT people. Do you really think that the United States remained neutral in World War II until the incident on Pearl Harbor? Well, my friends, you're in for a real treat, because the United States did a whole lot of trade deals with the Nazis in Germany. I'm sorry, my friends, but the neutrality narrative that is spread around about the US not being involved in World War II. Bitch, the United States was very much involved. Enthusiastic, in fact. Why is there a current LGBT scare today and a communist scare in the 50s, but there was no Nazi scare during World War II? There were American Nazis in World War II. There were American Nazis here in America at that point. There was even the American Nazi Party back then. They even had a fucking rally at Madison Square Garden. Just because Walt Disney and Dr. Seuss made advertisements for selling war bonds that would eventually be used to legitimize fighting the Nazis in World War II does not mean that Disney or Dr. Seuss or even the United States were anti-Nazi. Dr. Seuss and Walt Disney were notoriously anti-Semitic. Very well-known racists, in fact. You think that they have any fucking opposition to transphobia? That's why we make fun of rainbow capitalism. Because rainbow capitalism is a performative measure made by corporations. Meanwhile, Disney presently today donates money to anti-LGBT causes and organizations, ones that are actively putting in place those anti-transgender legislations. I don't think that we should act fucking surprised here. Neoliberal capitalism is just simply taking its course. It's co-opting radical movements so that it can advance its own profitability and agenda and imperialistic reach around the world. For instance, Dennis Baxley, the senator of the state of Florida, sponsored the Don't Say Gay bill under the generalization that parents of LGBT children are abusers. But I guess Brendan Smith, a notorious fucking child in the Catholic Church, is not an abuser. Because, you know, there's a hefty $4.4 billion industry in legally representing Catholic priests who are habitual fucking child.
Took sadistic pleasure in children wherever he went in the world.
He said that he had one more test to give me.
I did act. John Brady chose not to report Brendan Smith's crimes to the police in 1975. Father Brendan Smith was sent to Providence, Rhode Island in the United States in 1965. The church didn't bother to tell parishioners about Father Brendan Smith's past as a child. However, it didn't take their children long to find out.
I did act.
He got away with it for almost 50 years. But only now do we fully understand not only his depravity, but the squalid and debased cover-up by educated men of the church, men with doctorates in canon law. Bishops, archbishops and cardinals knowingly and deliberately hid the sins of the vile by priests to protect the good name of the church.
But that's besides the point. I'm getting distracted. In 2015, he swore to quote-unquote never affirm homosexuality. His words, not mine. In the following consecutive years, beginning in 2016, Disney endorsed his campaign to quote-unquote never affirm homosexuality, even as recent as 2021. By the way, can we just take a second to highlight the contradiction that there is to a bill aptly titled Don't Say Gay in a country that specifically prides itself on free speech backed by the First Amendment of the Constitution, meaning it's okay to speak and assemble freely unless the state decides that you're some kind of degenerate worthy of silencing due to your inherent existence. Keep in mind that Disney, who regularly donates to Dennis Baxley, owns several other corporations and intellectual properties, including but not limited to ABC, Fox, Hulu, Marvel, and Star Wars. And it's important to remember that all of these companies in some way, shape, or form partake in performative representation of LGBTQ plus people in the media, while Disney, behind the curtains, endorses a senator and by extension the Don't Say Gay bill that actively harms LGBTQ plus people and children in the state of Florida. Let me just be clear here. Queer and trans representation in media, especially in big corporations, is not really something that I'm against. In fact, I fully endorse it, especially when it's representation that is put in a very positive light. for example, Gonzo from the Muppets just recently came out as transgender, which is really cool because Gonzo's a queer icon anyway. But Gonzo and the Muppets as intellectual properties are owned by Disney, the same corporation that endorses transphobic and homophobic laws. Another corporation worth noting is Chick-fil-A, which is one of the largest fast food chains in the world, known for really shitty chicken sandwiches and being theoplutocratically governed. Now, look, don't get me wrong here, I love chicken, and I especially enjoy chicken sandwiches with pickles and everything in them. But the fact that Dan Cathy, the CEO of Chick-fil-A, donates millions of dollars to anti-LGBTQ+ organizations and causes makes the investment in their products not worth it, considering I may be shooting myself in the foot. After all, I think autonomy is more important than chicken sandwiches anyway. That's a moot point though, because in 2019, Chick-fil-A said that they would stop donating to homophobic and transphobic causes. But now Dan, the CEO, just donates it all himself with his own bank account. Dan Cathy has a net worth of $7.1 billion. He is noted for saying that gay marriage would quote-unquote invite God's wrath on our nation. Well, Dan Cathy, I have some bad news for you. God is not only gay, but God is also a woman, and Jesus Christ is Palestinian. Dan Cathy in particular is a regular donor of the National Christian Charitable Foundation, the 6th largest charity in the United States. This is also the reason why the Equality Act has not passed in the United States. By the way, the Equality Act, if it were passed, would protect LGBTQ+ people from discrimination in the United States. But it hasn't passed yet, and you can thank the National Christian Charitable Foundation. Between the years 2015 and 2017, the National Christian Charitable Foundation has donated to several organizations identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as hate groups that are anti-LGBTQ+, anti-immigration, and anti-Muslim. Their biggest recipient is the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a network of extremist lawyers who take part in criminalizing homosexuality, sterilizing transgender people, and boldly claiming gay men are Meanwhile, the Catholic Church continues to go unchecked with over 800 plus cases of child for over a century, and probably longer than that if we're being real here. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The Alliance Defending Freedom also opposes the Equality Act, which is another contradiction in which they do not care to meaningfully address. I mean, they are called the Alliance Defending Freedom, but I guess equality is not freedom. Anyway, the National Christian Charitable Foundation also endorses the Family Research Council, which has advocated for conversion therapy and electroshock therapy. You know, because electrocuting your child for being gay is not child abuse. It's more important that these fuckwads let their county, y'all. As you can see here, I got the logo for the Family Research Council because it's part of the video, but I kind of stumbled upon this by accident. Again, you know, so it's like, what the fuck? Josh Duggar, I know about this guy. This guy is a fucking pedophile. Like, I'm not even trying here, but I didn't know that he was a fucking lobbyist for the Family Research Council. This is just ridiculous that the same person who was the literal lobbying arm of the Family Research Council.
You were in the news for making a robocall that suggested transgendered people might want to go into the bathrooms of girls, locker rooms of girls, and that they may be child folks have used that in the past week against you, saying, how could you unfairly, in their view, compare transgendered people to child, knowing what you know about Josh?
I think that protecting young girls and not allowing young men and men in general to go into a girl's locker room is just common sense.
But this is different because you injected child molestation into it.
I think you actually said that, and actually is an adult that preys on children. Joshua was actually 14 and just turned 15 when he did what he did. And I think the legal definition is 16 and up for being an adult preying on a child. So he was a child preying on a child.
You do not view Josh as a...
No.
Wow. So Josh Duggar's own family cannot holistically own up to the fact that their child that they raised is a... Of course, they used their tactical charm effective by saying, oh, what Josh did was wrong and what Josh did was unacceptable. But there's so much emphasis on ostracizing other people. Like, it almost feels like it's opportunistic for the Duggar family to be transphobic. And Joshua Duggar's father, who also has a reality show with the whole family in it, especially when they knew that this shit was going on within their family, is far more fixated on the quote-unquote legal definition of than the fact that their son was being a fucking sexual predator to their own siblings. So when you hear them backpedaling on their and their transphobia, keep in mind that they really do not give two shits about children at all, and this is consistent with this movement. It's all in the name of charm effectiveness. Oh, and by the way, Mrs. Common Sense over here, who doesn't know how to keep her son from being a fucking has the audacity to say that transgender people using their gender-affirming bathroom choice is... As a trans woman myself, if I were to go into the men's restroom, the chances of me, specifically me, getting sexually or physically assaulted increases drastically. But not that you would care, I'm sure you would like to see me get especially when there is good reason for them to look inward, for them to maybe question, maybe my quiverful fucking bullshit ass is not safe for children. By the way, did you know that there was a time when conservatives were perfectly fine with wearing face masks because they deemed AIDS as an exclusively homosexual disease? In fact, they were willing to shoot their own children, Abraham style, if their children had AIDS. I guess I'm just concerned because they are so adamant about making sure that their children are somehow not LGBTQ. Like, I know I'm not alone in this, of course. These fundamentalist right-wing bozos will tell you not to talk about politics with their children, but then they do stupid bullshit like this.
Where should we be putting our focus? I'll tell you where our enemies are putting it. They're putting it on the kids. They're going into the schools. You go into Palestine, and I can take you to some websites that will absolutely shake you to your foundations and show you photographs of where they're taking their kids to camps like we take our kids to Bible camps, and they're putting hand grenades in their hands. They're teaching them how to put on bomb belts. They're teaching them how to use rifles. They're teaching them how to use machine guns. It's no wonder, with that kind of intense training and discipling, that those young people are ready to kill themselves for the cause of Islam. I want to see young people who are as committed to the cause of Jesus Christ as the young people are to the cause of Islam. I want to see them as radically laying down their lives for the gospel as they are over in Pakistan and in Israel and Palestine and all those different places, you know, because we have, excuse me, but we have the truth.
Just let kids be kids.
It was considered quote-unquote God's wrath for AIDS to kill people. And if you're the Westboro Baptist Church, it's still considered God's wrath for AIDS to kill people. Ronald Reagan, who is regularly regarded as one of America's greatest presidents in history, turned the other cheek to over 89,000 deaths related to AIDS and did nothing for 7 years out of his 8-year term. Instead, he would regularly propagate AIDS as something that was deserved for making quote-unquote poor life decisions, and that was a dog whistle for being queer as a poor lifestyle choice. Which means Ronald Reagan, as the president of the United States at the time, was reinforcing straightness as the status quo, as the acceptable way to live. That heteronormativity is the correct way to live. It wasn't Ronald Reagan, but Madonna, who raised millions of dollars to AIDS research because the state was being run by a charm-effective fundamentalist theocracy.
Christopher Flynn is responsible for teaching me.
Chris Flynn, who introduced Madonna at this fundraising dance-a-thon for the AIDS Project of LA, is an AIDS victim himself. He's also the first dance teacher Madonna ever had, and still a very close friend.
You will understand the depth of my faith in her when I tell you that she was among the first persons I turned to when I was diagnosed. She understands, she cares, and like you, she knows that being here makes all the difference.
Hey, see that guy on the left over there? The one that's not Ronald Reagan or Nancy Reagan for that matter? Well, that's Rock Hudson. That's a longtime friend of Nancy Reagan who became sick with AIDS and pleaded to Nancy to help him. And she turned him down. And guess what? He died 9 weeks later. Not to mention, LGBTQ plus people were not allowed to visit their dying loved ones in the hospital, while conservatives in present day wear Stars of David as a nod to Nazi Germany prosecuting the Jews because they don't want to wear face masks to Applebee's so they spread fucking goddamn COVID-19. This is Jason Kenney, claiming that anti-vaxxers are stigmatized for their opposition to wearing face masks, even though these same ass clowns did so during the AIDS epidemic.
The choice not to get vaccinated is not just a personal choice, it does have social consequences. But it's never okay to treat people like that, to stigmatize people in that way. In a way, it kind of reminds me of the attitudes that circulated in North America in the mid-1980s about people with HIV/AIDS.
But how would you react if I told you that Jason Kenney was also on the forefront for demonizing victims of HIV and AIDS in the 1980s as well? When he lived in San Francisco, he lobbied against the very same hospital visitation rights that LGBTQ plus people were forbidden to do, and he succeeded. The same rights in question, however, were given without hesitation to straight couples. And in the year 2000, he bragged about his role in overturning this law in San Francisco, rendering LGBTQ plus people from visiting their dying loved ones in the hospital.
I became president of the pro-life group in my campus and helped to lead a ultimately successful initiative petition which led to a referendum which overturned the first gay spousal law in North America.
What kind of sick fuck do you have to be to pull shit like that? All of this shit in particular was because the government did not want to invest in AIDS research and making condoms and abortion readily available and sufficiently funded. And people wonder why I'm an anarchist. But y'all have to remember that this isn't new and this is still present. It's also not exclusive to just one country. Several countries are pulling this shit. But I would like to encourage my audience to observe when rainbow capitalism is present in their day-to-day lives, especially in the month of June. Because let's remember that rainbow capitalism exists through the tactics of rainbow washing. Because let's make no mistake here, this is not corporations showing solidarity to queer and trans people worldwide, it's just marketing. Corporations have one goal, one single goal, and that is to profit. In the past, I've made a video talking about how punk rock was co-opted for corporate consumption, even though punk rock was literally created to reject the mainstream. So my point here is that it is happening here too with the queer community. But since the queer community is kind of going through a lot socially speaking, with a lot of legislative outcasting, I don't think this feels appropriate. This feels kind of gross even. Because pride feels kind of stolen from us, right? Like, I mean, pride is meant to be about what got us to this point. The fact that we're all still alive. The fact that there are many of us that are no longer with us. The fact that we have a long, long history that predates white supremacy, predates settler colonialism, predates capitalism. And yet the same corporations who are trying to get us to just get up and dance or whatever, it's like they don't support our existence in the long run. And that's the most damning thing about all of it. LGBTQ plus people is a potential demographic for them to tap into. I am by no means saying that you can't buy something with rainbow colors on it. After all, there is no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism. Even something as holier than thou, such as veganism, which, by the way, this is not a critique of veganism itself, but the broader behavior of the vegan market in capitalism, still regularly subjects poor people to the evils of capitalism, such as gentrification, rendering poor people homeless, and moving in rich white people and entrepreneurs into low-income neighborhoods. Critics of gentrification has went on to say that gentrification is another form of colonialism, some going as far as claiming that it is the next stage of colonialism. But that is another topic for another time. But the LGBTQ plus movement is also vulnerable for the same co-opting of their own movement for capitalist gain. It's not the fault of LGBTQ plus people, and also not even the fault of individual queer and trans people. Please don't mince my words here. It is the fault of capitalism, the mode of production that is the private ownership of the means of production, which necessitates its own power through exploitation, coercion, and of course, oppression.
Okay, do you have any good ideas, Snuffkin?
Well, if we only had more crime here, they wouldn't be able to close down the station.
Yes, but there's never any crime in Moomin Valley.
Unless we commit some, I guess.
What?
Live your life regardless of what the state thinks about all of our existence.
Let's go and fill Moomin Valley with crime. Come on!
Homophobes are terrified to admit that during their lives there have been moments when they've wavered in their minds. I'm not a heterosexual man, not ticking your boxes, that's not who I am.
I can't even remember when last time I had sex, and I want to have